Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to speak with you today. First of all, I'd like to take you to the future, a future where you're driving your car home at night after work and you turn your power on in your house and turn the heating on in your house from the comfort of your car. When you get home, you park your car in the driveway and you plug your electric vehicle into the socket. And that supplies two-way power. It also lets you put the power from the car that's left into your home, and it also allows you to charge the car overnight at a time that's convenient for you. When you walk into the house, you put your smartphone down on your workbench or your kitchen top, and it charges wirelessly. You then move to the LCD screen that's sitting on your wall, and you have a look at how much power you've exported onto the grid today, how much money you're getting paid to do that. You're also looking at how much battery storage is left in the batteries that you have at your home, and you're considering whether you're going to borrow some power from your neighbour because you're connected to their battery system, or whether you download from the grid. And that grid is now just a backup supply to your home. It's not predominantly your first line of supply. So that's the future that network providers such as Western Power, traditional providers all across the country and across the world are facing today, and it's coming soon. So we have to change and adapt. Believe it or not, I didn't grow up in the Wheatbelt region. I do hope that you can understand me today. My team have put together quite a lot of slides for me to talk to, and I did explain that a Scotsman talking fast isn't a good outcome for the audience listening, but we'll give it a good crack today anyway. In my role as Chief Operating Officer at Western Power, I have over 1,500 staff across the state. We have many depots across the Wheatbelt region, and we're a significant employer of people in the Wheatbelt region. So we also provide what is a very valuable service to the community in the Wheatbelt region, and that's both to the consumers of electricity as well to facilitate the connections of green emission power plants such as wind and biomass. Things are changing in our world. The electricity network that we know today is over 100 years old. The Western Power piece is the piece in the middle, and we connect generators to consumers. And typically it's one-way flow. Generators generate electricity, and those of us at the end of it consume it. This has been about for over 100 years. East Perth Power Station was built in 1916, and the network that was built around it looks and feels the same as it is today. But the world is changing. I remember reading recently that if you took somebody from the 16th century and put them into the 19th century, that they could actually function quite well. Things were pretty similar. There's some new things they would have to learn, but they would function quite well. You take that same person out of the 19th century and put them into today, and they just couldn't function. The world has changed dramatically over the last 100 years, and it's still changing dramatically. So from the network point of view, renewables are playing a major part in our future. So there's renewable energy out there, and there's generation on the network that wasn't contemplated 30, 20 or even 10 years ago by our network engineers. So both the type of generation as well as the location of the generation has changed dramatically, and that poses an interesting challenge to the network. More importantly, us as consumers and our behaviours are changing dramatically as well. The choice for us is massive. You're seeing electric vehicles come onto the grid. Now, that's just one example. People are putting solar panels on their roof and removing themselves slowly from the grid. The advent of battery technology is going to change the landscape dramatically. So where a solar panel is great during sunny periods, and same with wind when it's windy. When you have battery coupled with that, and you can store power and then use it at a later time, that changes the world dramatically for us. You see the advent of microgrids, where communities can build a self-sustained grid and look after themselves and really only use the network as a backup. So for us, it's a time of significant change, and our network has to change. We've seen in the past where organisations or industries have failed. You've heard about the Kodak moment, and they missed the advent of digital camera. The telecommunications industry that Boyd currently works in, and an industry that I used to work in, went through significant change, transformational change over the last decade and a half. 15 years ago, it wouldn't have been contemplated that people at home would disconnect themselves from the telecommunications network and no longer have a fixed home phone sitting on the wall. That has happened now. So things are changing dramatically for us. So we need to change as well. The network's going to move to a network that is through a point of shared connectivity. So no longer is generation just going one way from big scale generators to consumers like ourselves. It's going to go two-way. So the need to share capacity will be there. We believe that networks will still form an important part of the landscape of the power supply chain. Not everybody will be able to be self-sufficient. To have battery storage in your home, you need a particular landscape to do that. Not every home will have solar panels. If you put battery technology into substations, you still have to transfer it through the network to the consumer. Generators, whether it be wind farms, biomass, large solar farms, such as what you're seeing in the US, will play an important role in the network, but they still have to transfer that electricity to wherever the consumers are. So the network will continue to play an important part in the growth of the Western Australian economy for the foreseeable future. So we're changing as a business. I've been in the business for 4 years. I've been part of the executive team for the last 2 years, and I love change. Unfortunately, I'm in a business that's got 40 years, 50 years, 60 years of history, and many people have been there for a very long time. They don't necessarily embrace change quite the same way as I would like to do. So we are a business in transition. We are moving from being a network-focused business to a customer-focused business. So we've sat back and really thought about what do we want to be for our customers and what do our customers expect from us. It's no longer appropriate for people at Western Power to invest money just for the network's sake or just to make the network better, if at the end of the day the consumer doesn't get any value from that. So we're changing that way. So we want to add value to the supply chain, not add cost to the supply chain. We've put a point up there about historical underinvestment. The vast majority of the West Australian electricity network was built in the 60s, 70s and 80s, and that's no different from around the globe. And what you're finding now is that a large majority of infrastructure is getting to the stage where it's 40 or 50 years old. Now, unfortunately, investment hasn't kept pace with the ageing of the network, and we've now got this bit of a bow wave that's hitting us. So with the limited capital that we can get, we've got to be very careful as to where we invest our money, and we've got to do that in the areas that have the highest risk to the West Australian public. So we need to get the balance right. We still have to keep the lights on. And how often do you go home at night now and you turn on the light switch and the light comes on and you go, you beauty, I've got light. The reality for us as a network provider is that value has now dissipated. You expect it. When you go home at night and you turn on your light, it's expected that the light's going on. Now, if we take that away from you, it's a very different proposition. So while we're going through all of this change and while we're trying to react to the landscape that's changing around us, we need to keep the lights on, and that's absolutely vital. So about Western Power. Western Power's network is vast. It's one of the largest, most isolated networks in the world. We don't have the luxury that the Eastern States organisations do, where they can connect to each other. New South Wales connects to Victoria, New South Wales connects to Queensland, etc. We're isolated and we're self-sufficient. The network runs from Kalbarri down to Albany, all the way across to Kalgoorlie for us. We have over 1 million customers, 100,000 kilometres of power lines, enough to go around the world 2.5 times. 800,000 poles and towers, and we've got over 1 million customers. So it's a vast, vast network. Western Power is not a government department, it's not a government agency. We're a government trading entity. We have our own board and executive team who are actually separate from government. So it's a bit of a difference. So we've gone back to basics. So no longer do we have a vision that says we're going to be the world's best network by 2020 or something like that. We've gone back to basics, and we're focusing on our customers. So we're here to serve customers. Customers want a safe, reliable and affordable network. We use the word affordability carefully because it's not just about cost, it's about the value that brings. So it's not the cheapest network. There's got to be a value element on it. That's why we use affordability. And we connect people with electricity. That is our basic premise of what we do. So over the last 2 or 3 years, we've really been getting back to basics. Our injury frequency rate of our employees is almost halved. Customer experience has actually been positive. We've delivered the last 2 years, year-on-year OPEX reduction. back to the community of Western Australia and the government. And so we're lifting our performance while at the same time in keeping our employees engaged. It's a big ask. Affordability, there's an electricity market review underway at the moment that Minister Nahan set off, which is looking at the supply chain in the electricity sector and why the cost of electricity in Western Australia are where they are and how they compare to the eastern states. So one of the things that happens in eastern states is the concept of gold plating, where service providers have been able to invest vast amount of money into their networks to the point where they've got beautiful networks. We don't have a beautiful network. And many of you will look at the polls outside and say and agree with me there. But out of interest, I don't know where many of you would put Western Power as far as our cost of network is, but we're actually the third lowest in the country. The two network providers in Victoria and New South Wales underneath there are actually metro-centric network providers, so they have a high density of population. You know, when you look at the vastness of our network, as well as the low density of population, it says quite a lot. Your network isn't gold-plated. There has been underinvestment, and we need to try and rectify that. No Western Power presentation would be complete without a graph on poles, the bane of my life. I never thought wood poles could be so complicated, but they are, I promise you. So 51% of our poles are greater than 30 years of age. So that is a fact, and that's something that we're grappling with at the moment. And I'll come to some figures of what we're doing in the Wheatbelt region later as well. That translates to other assets within our network as well, conductors, transformers, etc. We have an aging network, as I said. So in the Wheatbelt region, over the first half of this financial year, so that's just within this 6-month period, we're replacing 490 wood poles, reinforcing about 5,500, treating another 280, a vegetation programme that reduces bushfire, doing 5.5 kilometres of reconductoring. So we do have significant investment in the Wheatbelt region on an ongoing basis. We also have very large committed projects. So the Midwest Energy Project is a $300 million transmission line which connects essentially just north of Perth all the way through towards the Geraldton region, which will really facilitate growth, allow very large users to come online to the power grid, and will also support the general growth in the region. Meriden Terminal Substation, Narrogin substations are being upgraded at the moment, and larger capacity has been put in place with new transformers. These are significant investments. I think in the last 2 years alone in Meriden we've invested approximately $10 million. So there's other projects on the go, and we'll continue to invest in the region. Many of it's within the substations, but we do have a very large asset investment programme of just over $1 billion per year in Western Australia, and the Wheatbelt is obviously impacted positively by that. So we'll continue to work with our customers. We'll connect large resource customers. We'll enable the growth of wind generation, biomass generation, solar generation in the network. We'll also enable the future connections of the local community, the general load growth that occurs. And we're preparing for the future. So we need to adapt, we need to innovate, and we need to change with the times. But we're an organisation that does have a very large presence in the Wheatbelt region and across the whole of Western Australia. We are a large employer of people, but we need to spend our money very, very wisely. So we have to allocate our scarce funds based on the highest risk areas of our network, and typically that forms the basis of the extreme and high bushfire zone areas. That's all I had for today. Thank you.